My toxic sister ruined my wedding by claiming that my kids don't count because I had them before the wedding. What she did next was so crazy that the police got involved. So, I got married about a week ago at the age of 24, and unfortunately things got pretty out of control. Let me start from the beginning. I have an older sister whom we call Stacy, who is 26 years old. We have always had a fierce sibling rivalry, and I mean that literally. We have hated each other since we were kids because we just want to outdo each other, and we never got along. Even when we grew up, we still hated each other. We made sure to never show outsiders how much we hated each other, but it was all hidden beneath the surface. When we lived together, we never talked, only putting on an act for family visits. But even our parents knew we didn't like each other, and they never even tried to fix things between us. I think that, in a way, that's what caused a lot of things to go wrong in the end, but I'll get to that in a minute. I felt a huge weight lifted when she moved out to college when she was 18, because it meant I could finally be myself at home and not have to tiptoe around her. She only came back during the holidays to brag about her life, because she was going to one of the best business schools in the state. I was a little jealous of her, but my only goal was to work harder than her and get into a better place than her. And I did, because I got into an Ivy League school, which was quite a slap in the face for her, and I celebrated in a way that was even bigger than hers. I thought getting into an Ivy League school would end our competition, but it didn't, because one day she announced that she wanted to start her own business, and with the help of her father she really succeeded. I don't know if it was luck or hard work that made it happen, but a few years ago her business took off, and she moved to Japan to expand the technical side of the business with great success. Our parents were very proud of her. About 2 years ago, she'd been living in Japan, but unfortunately, things didn't go well after I graduated from university, and what Stacy had achieved only added to the pressure. I found a job, but it was nowhere near as glamorous or satisfying as what she was doing, so I quit quickly, which turned out to be a huge mistake. I should have stayed there and worked hard, but instead I foolishly competed with my sister when I should have focused on myself and my career. I was really stupid and I regret it now, but it's done. For a while I kept waiting for things to fall into my lap, but they didn't, and I started to get frustrated. Stacy was excelling in her field, and her career was something my parents were always bragging about, which made me hateful, but I couldn't even say anything about it, or it would sound bitter and jealous, even though those were the feelings I did have, but I had to hide them every time I met my family and pretend to be happy for Stacy, because any other emotion than happy was unacceptable. That's when I met my husband, Jackson. 25M. I'm so glad I did, because meeting him pretty much changed my life. I had been unemployed for 6 months, waiting for something better to come along, but I wasn't having any luck. As I said, I was really depressed about life, so I downloaded a dating app. I wasn't really looking for anything. I just wanted to connect with someone, and use it as a distraction so I could stop thinking about my shitty life. I was having a hard time paying my rent, and even harder to buy the basic necessities for myself. I had to rely on my parents for money, and they would send me money every month. I have some, but it's never enough. I really struggle, and my parents help me pay my bills. Every month I promise them that I will pay them back as soon as I can. I can always hear their disappointment, and it drives me crazy because I know I'm not doing my best. Stacy was doing so much better than me, and I'm letting my parents down so much that I use dating apps and just hook up with people. I don't even really like it as a way to distract myself, for it worked for a while. I went out on dates for a few weeks, interested only in hooking up and not doing anything else. Most of the time it was just casual fun, but then I met Jackson and things changed. He was an interesting conversation partner at first, and he met all my requirements. He was also an excellent student at school, but after graduating from high school, he went to culinary school and worked in a restaurant. 2 years ago, he was charming and had just the right amount of masculinity, but at the time I told him that I wasn't looking for a serious relationship. He asked me out on a date and we chatted online for nearly 2 weeks. He told me that he was looking for a serious relationship and wasn't interested in the casual relationship that Mary was in. I liked that he was honest, so I decided to give it a try, not knowing what was waiting for me. After agreeing to the first date, I went out with him just to see how it would go, and it was really good. It felt like we had known each other for years. I think it was the best date of my life. We had a great time, and when I was with him I stopped trying to prove anything. It was the first time I had experienced that, and it made a big difference to the way I felt about other people around me. We could easily get along and chat. I don't know what changed, but I decided to give our relationship a real chance. We went on a few dates, but after 3 months together I found out I was pregnant. The only thing I was worried about at the time was how Jackson would react. Apart from that, I didn't worry about anything because he already knew me very well. During the first few weeks of our relationship, I told him everything about myself and my family, especially about how I had spent my whole life competing with my sister and trying to outdo her. But being with him made me want to be a better person, someone who truly belongs to me. He already knew everything about me, and I think I knew everything about him. In fact, he encouraged me to get out of my depression and actively look for a job instead of waiting for opportunities to come to me. So I ended up going back to the company where I had previously quit and continuing my old job. I think it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. When I found out I was pregnant, I had nothing to worry about at that point. I had been working for almost a month and things were going really well with Jackson. My only worry was how he would react because most people would think it was too soon and would back out of the relationship for fear of it, but deep down I really wanted this baby because I felt it was right. I can't explain it in words, but I just felt ready to be a mother. To my surprise, when I told Jackson the news of the pregnancy, he was very supportive. He said it was my body and I could do whatever I wanted, and that he would support me no matter what I decided to do. When I told him I wanted to have the baby, he was happier than anyone. He told me that he actually wanted me to have the baby too, because he felt ready, even though he was still young and we had only been together for 3 months. He told me that he didn't want to sound crazy or overbearing, which is why he let me decide, but my choice made the man incredibly happy. We agreed that even if we were going to have a baby, we would wait to get married until we knew each other better. We decided to continue with the pregnancy, and a few weeks later we even found out that we were expecting twins, which was another big surprise, but one we gladly accepted. Shortly after learning of the pregnancy, he moved in with me and at the same time introduced me to his parents. His parents were very kind, and they seemed to treat all their children equally, never forcing anyone to compete with each other. It seemed like a healthy family, and it was also the first time I had seen how a family worked, as I had never experienced it firsthand. However, I was a little skeptical about introducing him to my family because I knew my parents would not approve of my life decisions. I was a bright student with a promising future, but I decided to have a baby with a man I had known for less than a year and even live with him. Any parent would object and my parents might lose their minds. So I kept stalling until I started to show and I knew I couldn't hide it any longer. I arranged for my parents to come to my house with Jackson for moral support. They knew that I had been dating Jackson for a while, but they didn't know that I had been living with him, and that I was soon going to become the mother of his child. When I told them this, I expected them to get angry and yell at me or something, but they seemed happy for me. They hugged me excitedly and congratulated me on being pregnant. And when I told them I was pregnant with twins, my mom almost fainted with joy. Although their reaction was unexpected, I was glad that they weren't angry. In fact, when they heard the news, they even threw a party for me and announced to everyone that they were going to become grandparents. I also told them that I was only marrying Jackson because we were going to have a baby together, and we wanted to spend some time together before making such a big commitment, and they approved. I was really shocked that they were so supportive of everything, but it was a happy feeling. I really appreciate my parents being on my side in this, because if they had been against me or tried to change my mind about things, I would have hated it. I even told them that they were so supportive, which I actually didn't expect from them, so they told me that they realized that throughout our childhood they had never been good parents because they had never stopped my sister and me from competing with each other, and they thought they were doing us a favor by constantly pushing us to do better. But in doing so they realized that in the long run they may have messed things up. When they learned that I quit my job because I wanted to do something better, they knew that the decision was influenced by Stacy, who had started her own business and was doing well, so I also wanted to do something of my own and surpass Stacy. I found it strange that they knew about it even though I had never actually mentioned it to them. They said that as parents they knew what was going on and that they were responsible for it, so they wanted me to know that no matter what happened, they would always support me, and that I didn't have to constantly compete with Stacy to prove that I deserved their love and attention. They would always love me and be proud of both of us because we always did our best, and that was what mattered most to them. This was a very necessary conversation, and I was so glad to have it with my parents because it made things so much easier for me during and even after the pregnancy, because I was free to ask my parents to help out with the baby while Jackson and I were working. They told me that they had had a similar conversation with Stacy, but apparently it hadn't gone as well as they had hoped. She just laughed and said she didn't need them to say that because she really believed that I was a sore loser, and that was why I was falling apart and why my parents were trying to forgive me. They told us they were just as proud of us, but she knew what the truth was and she just refused to accept that our parents really wanted to turn over a new leaf and be better parents. She just firmly believed she deserved their love more because by her standards she was living a better life. My parents told me that when she comes back for the holidays they will talk to her because chatting online feels different, so they assured me that they would talk to Stacy and talk to her the same way they would talk to me so that she would stop trying to compete with me because until then she had been outdoing me and trying to make me feel bad, and she had started doing that ever since I announced the pregnancy. And have the same conversation with her as I would so that she will stop trying to compete with me because until then she has been surpassing me and trying to make me feel bad. Since I announced my pregnancy, she has been snubbing me, making unnecessary comments directly in the family group chat just to put me down and make me feel bad about being pregnant, even though I really don't see any reason to feel bad about it. But to her it's obviously a huge failure because I got pregnant before marriage and am living with someone she barely knows, so it's a huge failure for her and she thinks she can do whatever she wants to me, which really annoys me. I almost wanted to quit the group chat several times, but my parents convinced me to stay because they said they really became better parents and they wanted us to stick together, so I stayed for them. My parents assured me that they would put an end to it, or at least do their best to do so, and if they couldn't then I was free to leave the group. So when Stacy came back for Christmas my parents told me that they were going to talk to her, which they did, but unfortunately she had gone too far by then, and her sole purpose in life was to humiliate me and make me feel utterly insignificant. She was unbearable that year, although she had been annoying for a few years before that. He resented her so much because she was successful in her career, but that year it was even worse because not only had she just returned from Japan, but she had also returned knowing that I was pregnant, and she was so far ahead of me in terms of success and wealth. She didn't even let up on any opportunity to remind us of this. She kept bragging, flirting with me, and even asked if I wasn't happy for her. It was really embarrassing and uncomfortable. I had to leave the party early because I really didn't want to lose my temper or burst into tears in public. My parents tried to talk to Stacy and ask her to behave, but she said that she had worked hard to get where she was and that she would not let me take that away from her, so she could brag all she wanted. I had to accept that, so I decided to cut ties with her and leave that circle. My parents also think this is the best option. We haven't spoken for 2 years. I don't know what she's been up to recently, but recently I heard from a few relatives that she's back from Japan with a child. I first heard about this about 4 weeks ago. It's a miracle baby, apparently only 2 months old. My parents told me that they had video called her a few times before she returned, and had never noticed anything unusual about her, let alone that she was pregnant. She said she wanted to surprise everyone, and that she had become a mother, and had a private wedding with the father of her child a year ago. Now she can finally talk about it. The timing is very suspicious, because almost everyone in the family knows that I should get married around the same time, but now thanks to her, everyone can only talk about her marriage and daughter. She said her husband is still in Japan because of his busy work and couldn't come, but she brought her daughter because she wanted the family to meet her. But I couldn't let something like that get to me, because I was about to get married and it was supposed to be a wonderful time. So even after she returned I didn't want to see her. Unfortunately it didn't matter because she still found a way to ruin my wedding. On the day of the wedding, she showed up uninvited, right after the ceremony. I honestly am glad that it happened after the wedding was over. She ruined my wedding, and when I saw her in the crowd of guests I almost lost it. But Jackson and my parents helped me calm down because she had obviously snuck in. If I had made a scene it would have given her exactly what she wanted, to make the wedding about her. As long as she didn't do anything actively bad, we could let her stay and deal with it later. I was getting married at my Aunt Jackson's farmhouse, so security wasn't tight there, and that's how she managed to sneak in. Now, I kind of regret not spending more on security because if I had we could have avoided a lot of things. During her time at the wedding she kept saying that she was incredibly lucky with her miracle child, while my kids were bastards and didn't count because I had had them before marriage, which was incredibly insulting because she told everyone she met while socializing at the wedding, and then everyone who talked to her came running to tell me about it. I could only smile and ignore it because I didn't want to argue with her and ruin my wedding. It was really hard, but I got through it. I almost broke down once, but before I could say anything, the police rushed in. I don't know what happened, but they told us to seal off the exits and within seconds they locked us in. They arrested Stacy, which was really overwhelming because there was this woman screaming and crying, hugging the baby that was supposed to be my sister's, claiming that it was her baby. After that, my mind was a complete mess and I just remember people saying a lot of things and being handcuffed. It wasn't until much later that we figured out that the baby wasn't even her sister's. All the photos she showed us were taken from her friend's social media account, and she had photoshopped herself into the photos, looking like a psycho. The worst part was that the times she brought the baby to meet us were actually times when she was babysitting for her friend. She had been living with her friend since she returned from Japan because she had already terminated the lease on her apartment and was looking for a place to live, so she was babysitting for her friend for free. That's why she never invited our parents or relatives to visit her, only visiting them on the day of the wedding. She attended my wedding without my friend's consent. She took the baby while her friend and her husband were asleep, and then refused to answer any phone calls, so her friends had to call the police and have her arrested. Thankfully, she kept talking about my wedding and how she wanted to embarrass me. So her friends guessed where she would be and found her, arrested her. It was crazy. I can't believe it happened, but it did happen to my family, and I still have a hard time accepting it. It's one thing to think that Stacy is competitive, but to know that she was willing to resort to such extreme psychotic measures to prove to our parents that she is better than us is very concerning. Now she is pleading with her friends not to press charges against her because she obviously won't win and she will end up in jail, so nothing has happened yet. But somehow she blames me for all of this and claims that I only got married to show off in front of her. Let's not forget that I haven't had contact with her for almost 2 years, and I haven't even spoken to her since our last interaction. I was even generous enough to let her attend my wedding because I didn't want to make a scene and humiliate her. She stole my wedding and turned it into an ugly thing. If anyone is to blame, it is me. So when she contacted me yesterday and told me that I needed to convince her friends that I had forced her to do crazy things, I told her that I hoped she would end up in jail because that is where she belongs, or in a mental hospital because she is crazy. But now my parents think I need to help her and convince her friends that she is confused because I keep harassing her with news of my marriage and baby, so they won't press charges and have her arrested. After all, she lives with them and takes care of the baby. The case is a bit complicated. The police haven't figured it out yet, and they can't proceed without her friend's consent. If she hadn't been living with them and actively caring for their child while they were away, it would have been a clear case of kidnapping. But since that's not the case, she still managed to avoid going to jail. She keeps claiming that they've agreed to her taking the child, but there's no way to prove it, so she's not in trouble yet. But we just need to convince them, and I don't want to do it. I really don't think she deserves my help, but my parents think that in many ways I would be wrong to abandon her. So Ada wants my sister to go to prison. Update 1. Okay, I've decided to cut ties with my entire family, including my parents. Yes, they helped me a lot during and after the pregnancy, but I don't want to deal with them anymore. I feel like I need some space for a while, and whether they support me or not doesn't matter to me right now. I just want to be with my husband and child. I can't do that if I'm bothered by their bickering, so I want to get away from it all because it's really giving me a headache. I appreciate what my parents did after I announced my pregnancy, but I'm really fed up with everything. As for Stacy, I think it's pretty obvious why I don't want to help her. She doesn't deserve my help. She dug her own grave, so she'll have to get out of it on her own. Jackson thinks it's the right choice. Yes, it is. I've just heard from a few relatives that Stacy is in big trouble because her friends have decided to sue and pursue the matter further. So far, Stacy has claimed that she had her friends' consent to take the child at any time, but this is hard to prove in court, and given her behavior at the wedding and the fact that she has always claimed the child is hers, I can't see how she can get out of this one. It's frustrating, but honestly, I'm not surprised. I'm not speaking to my parents either, and I won't until they tell me I did the right thing and apologize for asking me to help her. It's a lot to ask, but I don't want to talk to them until they realize how badly they ruined Stacy and my childhood. They need to really understand that it's their own fault too. Update 3. Hi, Stacy is now on trial and we don't know what the outcome will be. But if she is found guilty, she could be sentenced to about 5 years in prison, but she is mentally unstable, so the sentence may be reduced. Wedding, because I can't ask my parents to help with the kids, and since we haven't made up, we'll have to ask Jackson's parents to help out while we're gone, but only for 2 weeks, which isn't long. I just hope my honeymoon is better than the wedding, And I have a feeling it will be, because it'll just be me and Jackson.